Welcome to Talks from the Shed, presented by Ken Pugh. For an overview, see the introductory video in the Talks from the Shed channel on YouTube.
Welcome to Business Value, what it is and what to do with it. Well, agility focuses on rapidly delivering business value. So we're going to answer three questions. What is business value? How do we estimate business value? And what do we do with the business value? First, I'd like to define the product or project team. It consists of three halves. The customer unit, the one who provides the requirements and provides the business value estimates. The second is the developer unit that are going to provide the implementation estimates and actually implement the requirements. And the third, the quality assurance unit that validates the requirements are the right ones and makes sure that what the developer manifests is what the customer actually wants. So, the first question is, what is business value? Well, as a Supreme Court justice said one time about an entirely different topic, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. So, just pause this video for a moment and write down what you think business value is. Well, what can business value be? It could be increased revenue. That's pretty straightforward. Or the opposite, decreased expenses. Everything about the dollar. That's straightforward business value. But there are some things that don't involve the dollar, like customer satisfaction. Well, on customer satisfaction, we've got promoters, those things that make the customer really want to buy the product. We've got the satisfiers, the things that must be in the product or the customer want to buy it. And finally, the detractors, which make the customers run away from the product. So we've got things that are not necessarily measurable in dollars. Well, some other people say, well, there's some other things that could be business value, like staying in business. That usually has a lot of business value to it. Or staying out of jail. I had one developer tell me, I'd like to see our CEO in jail. And I said, I'm sorry. Business value is determined by the business, not by the developers. Avoiding risk. And some people think and have said that information on what to build and how to build it has business value. Well, that's a lot of different aspects of business value. A requirement. Every requirement should have a business value associated with it. If it doesn't, why are we requiring it? Why should it be part of our application? Well, we also need to prioritize the requirements. Especially if we have multiple product owners, they need to agree on the priorities. And the priority should be partly based on business value. So, an old-fashioned requirements document, you know, the ones that are 100 and 200 pages long, they used to have things like must have, should have, could have, might have. Well, they never spelled out in your dreams, but there was always wording that meant that. So there was prioritization in the old-fashioned requirements documents. We're going to have the same prioritization, obviously, in Agile. So now, I mentioned that the customer unit has a responsibility for estimating the business value. Well, we could use dollars, but often dollars are hard to compute. You can make a rough estimate perhaps for an entire project, but not necessarily for individual pieces within that project. We're going to use a business value that is unitless. And what this is going to allow us to compare dollars to things that are not dollars. And the values that we're going to assign to this business value are just like the Fibonacci series. 1/2, 1, 2, 3, 5, and so forth. I still have a 0 in there. 0 means, well, I can't really identify a business value, but I think I'd really like to have this in there. As you'll see, those typically fall to the bottom of the priority list. As the requirement is done, the business value is achieved. So, we're going to measure this on a business value chart. Every iteration, we are going to plot the business value for the requirements that we have completed during that iteration. Now, a couple of things. You'll notice that it tends to start off a little slow because our velocity for a new team or project tends to be a little slower. And then, chances are that 50% of the effort will actually deliver more than 50% of the business value. In fact, chances are it could be 40-60 or 20-80 in some projects. So let's take an example to give you one way to determine business value. This is Sam's vinyl rental store. Turns out Sam recognized that there was a business opportunity. He noticed that people who bought vinyl albums were paying like $40 sometimes for an album. And he thought, well, maybe he could rent the albums. So he started up a store. And it's been working out pretty well, but he's only been using paper systems. Well, he wants to replace that. Current system takes too much time to check out the albums. And sometimes it's really hard to get a report on an inventory with a manual system. So, Sam came up with 4 major requirements. Keep track of where each album is in the store and on rental. Report when the albums are overdue. Have a catalog so that customers can see what albums are available and what songs are in what albums. And finally, a charge system to bill the customers monthly instead of at every rental. So, we've got our 4 requirements here. And we'll just put these up on the board. So now, how do we estimate business value? Well, one way is to use triangulation. What you're simply going to do is compare items to multiple other items, and there could be items that are similar in business value, so you'll just group them together. And then you'll assign relative priorities. We can start at the bottom with a 1, or the top at 100, or somewhere in between. They're all relative. So now, how do we do triangulations? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to start with our cards in the pile, as you can see here. Our outcome is these cards are going to be placed relative to each other. Now, if we've got multiple players, here's the game. Each player can play the top card from a pile and put it relative to the others. They can move a currently played pile, or they can pass. And what you'll do is repeat until there are no more cards in the pile. And nobody wants to move a card. So, let's give an example here. Here's keep track of albums. It's our first card, so we're just going to put it in the middle here. Report overdue items. That's definitely less business value than keeping track of the albums, so we're going to put it right down here. An album catalog. Well, relative to these, is it equivalent to that, or somewhere in between? Let's put it somewhere in between. And finally, a charge system. Well, how does that compare? Equal, equal, Once again, maybe somewhere in between as well. So now, we take a look at the relative priorities and go, you know, keeping track of the albums in an album catalog, they just don't seem like relative to each other. This just seems like it ought to be a bit higher, that maybe we're missing something in there, a requirement of some business value. So, now that we've got them, we simply start, and we'll start with 100 here, a 100 for this. That's going to be a 60 for our missing one, a 40, a 20, and a 13. We have just assigned business value. Well, that's only one half of the equation. Our developers need to make an estimate of cost and effort. Most people have already been doing story points, and that's your relative estimate of cost and effort. Maybe you use planning poker. Maybe you use relative, just like we've done. You're going to assign a story point estimate to these. So let's do that. Here we have our album catalog. That seems like, or excuse me, keeping track of albums. That seems relatively simple. The album catalog seems even a little less simple than that. The charging system, that's going to involve a lot of billing issues and everything. And how about reporting on overdue items? Well, I think the catalog is actually going to be a little simpler than that. So now, what do we have? Our relative effort estimates. And here, we could start with 2, start with 1, start with whatever you like. We'll call this a 2. We'll call this a 3, a 5, and an 8. However you assign your story points. Now that we've got that, we can determine our bang for the buck. And what is bang for the buck? Business value points divided by story points. Sort of a rough return on investment. Now, minor differences are negligible. 1.3 versus 1.4. Why? Because an estimate divided by an estimate does not make a better estimate. And in prioritization, you might want to prioritize the high bang items. So let's take a look here. Charge system. 20 divided by 8 is 2. 100 divided by 5 is 20. 13 divided by 3 is 4. 40 divided by 2 is 20. But now, we'll reorganize them in bang for the buck sequence. Now notice that keep track of the albums and album catalog have the same bang for the buck. That's okay. We can now take a look and say, is there a particular sequence we should do them in? Well, obviously, keeping track of albums, we need that before we have an album catalog. There's our sequence. So let's come back to the business value chart. What is this bang for the buck? Well, the slope is roughly the bang for the buck, assuming that our story points per iteration are relatively constant. So, bang for the buck is our slope. Now, after a while, our bang for the buck is going to slow down. What is this telling us? When it decreases, consider the termination of that project, or that theme or epic that you're working on. And look for other projects or themes or epics that probably have bigger bang for the buck. Well, business value isn't everything. There's another concept called weighted shortest job first. That includes the cost of delay and some risk elimination and opportunity enhancement. But that's for another talk from the shed. So, try it out. Take your set of requirements that you have now, have your customers assign business value to them. You assign, as the developers, assign a story point estimate and compute bang for the buck and see how the prioritization based for bang for the buck works out. That's it for business value, what it is and what to do with it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Talks from the Shed. For more talks, go to the YouTube channel. Send suggestions on talks to Ken at talksfromtheshed.com. To discuss how to apply these ideas to your business, contact ken.pugh@netobjectives.com.